I'm going to be talking to you today about notarial activities, international documentation, as well as some negotiation. Are you in the right place? Yes? Okay, good. Have I? Oh, brilliant, even better. You better find me 15 minutes of questions. Pressure's on you now, because I'm absolutely down to 28 minutes. No. So we'll talk about notary activities, we'll talk about international documents, we'll touch on business culture and supporting your directors overseas, and if we have time we'll talk a little bit about negotiation. Okay? In terms of me, there's no slide about me because what's important is what I tell you and to give you as much information. I'm a 17-year qualified lawyer and notary public, and I've worked with PAs for the whole of my career, and I must say thank you to PAs because all the way through my career, my bosses thought that they were the guys and ladies who taught me what I knew, and actually they weren't. It was the PAs. It was the soft skills in particular, communication, organisation skills, and that was down to you guys. So on behalf of all PAs, thank you very much. So without further ado, let's just take you through today's agenda. So we'll talk about the increased job role for the PA in the international context. We'll talk about notary and legalisation and the red tape. We'll talk about business culture and we'll talk about international negotiation, and we'll take some questions in the 15 minutes that I've now got to spare. How many of you are now working across multiple time zones in your day-to-day activities? Bit of a pain, isn't it? How many of you think that your bosses really appreciate the extra pressure that the extra time zones put you under? Okay, right. So we're all on the same page. You have an increased role now as a result of the increased global activity, and it doesn't just start with multinationals, it's companies all the way through down to even the smallest of businesses are looking to international activities. Except it wasn't something that you were necessarily trained to do when you first started your PA or EA careers. So it's a whole, it's an extra layer of skills. But I don't think you have a problem with that because you are supreme organisers, and I call them sweepers. You are the people who, the boss has an idea, the director has an idea or a notion, and you make it happen. And in the international context, that's really, really important. If you're driving new business, having somebody in the background to help make it happen or help it be followed up is absolutely key. Otherwise, you can waste thousands and thousands of travelling budget going to places and then not actually having follow-up or execution. Scheduling on the move, I don't know about you, but I think I probably gave at least one of my PAs, white hair, at least one of them over the years, because unless I travel a lot in India, the Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, and they're awkward, and China, and they're awkward countries. And my PA, Andrea, when I was in the law firm, was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, but she couldn't relate to the fact that I was in a car, stuck in a traffic, 4 hours traffic in Mumbai. The journey time told me it should take half an hour, and I'm 4 hours late for a meeting, and it's a nightmare. She couldn't really appreciate it because she wasn't on the ground. So one of the things I would say is the more you can encourage your directors to tell you what it's actually like on the ground when they are working internationally, the better, because some of these locations are really quite bizarre to work in. And so the scheduling that goes on, it's not like scheduling at home. It's not like ringing up and saying, I want to go and meet somebody in Bishopsgate in London and you're based in Bloomsbury. You can have the same logic in Mumbai, but it will take you 4 hours to get the distance between Bloomsbury and Bishopsgate. So it's so scheduling on the move. It's about managing the expectations of your boss. And I used to get told off every now and again by my PA when I would be asking just for superwoman effort. So manage your boss's expectations with the international workload. Travel planning, surface transport. That's been the biggest headache for me when I've been travelling overseas. Not the airs, not the air miles, not the train travel, but actually when I'm on the ground and I'm trying to get from place to place. And in my experience when talking to other directors and international business folk, when they are travelling, it's the getting from A to B and being understood when getting from A to B. So I've got a solution for that, which I'll share with you in a minute. Accommodation in emerging markets. You guys probably have control of the travel budget for your directors in terms of where you choose to put them. For your own sanity, put them in 4-star if it's an emerging market, simply because 3-star generally means 1. We've got some nodding of the heads, and all that does is give you more hassle, because then you've got the boss on the phone, you know, it's not, and you just don't want the extra chaos. You're managing the day job whilst they're away. So 4-star in emerging markets would be my top tip. Technology has been my complete godsend overseas, and also a godsend from a budgetary point of view. If you are, hello, well, do come in. No problem at all. You haven't missed much. Technology. If you have a director who is going regularly to a particular location, it's well worth your while investing in local SIM cards and local dongles. That sort of cut my budget by about 70% in 1 year in terms of the costs. So I was very, and that was the idea of my PA, so she was very popular with the FD. Every single director who works internationally should have one of these in their bags, because when you are stuck in emerging markets in a 4-hour traffic jam and your mobile phone's running out of power, your laptop's running out of power, your BlackBerry's running out of juice, if you are lucky enough to be in a taxi or a private car that has a cigarette lighter, then you can relax. And that's a top tip. So for Christmas, we should buy them one of these. They're $2.99 in Asda. Think local, get a Mr. or Mrs. Fix-It. Now, I'm not talking about anything dodgy at all. What I'm talking about is having somebody who is your opposite in location. If you're lucky enough to have subsidiaries in those locations, then fantastic. If not, talk to your supplier base or even your closest clients. And if they have a PA or an EA in their team who you get to know and you get to like, they are worth their weight in gold to help you with the on the ground issues. And I was lucky. I've got a few of those in different countries now, and it means I don't mind going back to those countries where I don't have a Mr. or Mrs. Fix-It. I don't like going. And that's the truth. So, PAs in other countries may have different experiences, different training. They may also have different relationships with their boss. You are all equals with your bosses, with your directors. They rely on you massively. You are an extension of them. That doesn't necessarily apply in other markets where there may be cultural differences in terms of how PAs relate to their bosses and vice versa. So always bear that in mind. Follow-up is everything, and this is where I think PAs and EAs are amazing, if the director is sensible enough to use them effectively. Because you go to a country, you'll have all your meetings, and you've left your day job behind. So you know you're going to come back to all of that chaos anyway. You go back with a whole bunch of business cards, you've had a great trip, and now it's all about follow-up, except you haven't got time to do the follow-up because you've got the day job back on your desk. So having the follow-up agreed before the director goes is actually really helpful, because then everyone's on the same page, and also it means that the PA and the EA will actually then move the director forward. They'll actually make the director do what the director needs to do, because otherwise we won't do it. International business takes 3 Ps, like communication. Marketing is 4 Cs. Communication is key. In terms of international business, you have to have personal relationships, you have to have patience, and you have to have perseverance. And patience and perseverance are different. The way in which business gets conducted in many other markets isn't as we know it here. In terms of formality, in terms of regulation, in terms of approach, etiquette. So it all impacts on getting the job done. And it can be quite stressful for a director if they're targeted to hit new business and they're expected to come back having landed a contract and they don't. It can be a very frustrating time. And it's often not their fault. It's because they're in a cultural environment that's different, and so they have to play to different ground rules. So the more you can understand culture, the better for your team. Remembering there are formalities for international documentation. We'll talk about Notary in a minute. And that's important because there's always an extra layer. It's not as simple as signing a client contract necessarily between supplier and client. it is often a little bit more complicated. And just going back to preparation, please encourage your directors to prepare before, during, and for post-trip, before he or she's actually left the country. That's always helpful. So everyone needs a Deepak. This is my Mr. Fix-It in India, and I thought I'd show you a picture of him. This is Deepak, and I met Deepak in 2008, completely by random, waiting for a taxi at the Intercontinental in Mumbai. And he was his next guy. He speaks and writes perfect English, as well as 6 other Indian dialects. He knows Mumbai very well. He's taught me Indian culture. I sit in the front of his car. And he's taught me everything I need to know, really, about Indian culture. He's obsessed about timekeeping because he knows that's important to me from where I come from in the West. I've helped him develop him, so he's now running a little company with other people who do the same. He's now become Notary's Mumbai coordinator. So he now has business cards, and he now looks after my clients when they go, which means I get less stressed about it. And he helps me get it done. So he's almost like a PA, in a way, without a lot of the skills that you obviously all have. But he now makes Mumbai a breeze. I hate going to Delhi. I don't have a Deepak in Delhi, but I have a Deepak in Mumbai. He does my scheduling, my driving, my accommodation, my mobile, comms. He owns the mobile and the mobile broadband that I use. He sorts out my currency. If I've got my flights to change, he does that for me. He just basically fixes all the stuff I need on the ground. And the scheduling, I can't tell you how important that is. I will tell him by text the meetings I want to have and the locations. He will come back and tell me which order I can arrange them. And the reason he does that is the very first time I met him, I'd arranged all my meetings. I was very proud of myself. And I'd arranged to have a meeting up at the airport and then another meeting at Nariman Point. And it doesn't look far on the map, except it was 4.5 hours. And I'd allowed half an hour. Oh. He said, Dawn, never again. And I texted him. So if you can find yourself a Deepak, I would strongly recommend that you do, because they are gold dust, especially in places like India and China. I have a Jerry in China. But you do, I'm saying it with some jest, but actually, this guy is making my company successful in India and making my clients' businesses successful in India. So, well done, Deepak. Right, so red tape. How many of you use Notaries? Pain in the neck, aren't they? Yeah. Okay, so you've got international business, you've got a document, one of your subsidiaries says, foreign subsidiary says, document needs to be notarised, and you go, oh. Because now you've got 2 hurdles. You've got to get your director in the room at the same time as a notary. And you might have an even worse nightmare because you might have 2 directors to get in the same room as the notary. So I apologise that notaries are pains. But the general principle is many documents around the world, when they're signed here, in order for them to be effective in the receiving country, they need to have extra hurdles to jump through. They need to do hoops to jump through. They need to do more in terms of authentication. So the whole process of authenticating a document for use in another country is what we call notarization. And sometimes it goes further than just me signing. It sometimes also involves the Foreign Office, and it also sometimes involves the consulate or the embassy. And that's called legalisation, and we'll talk about that in a minute. It's a great way for these countries to make money. What is a notary? We're legal professionals, just so you know. There's 3 branches of the legal profession: solicitors, barristers, and notaries. We're actually appointed by the Archbishop of Canterbury. He's the boss. There are 120,000 solicitors in the country, something like 18 or 19,000 barristers. That's actually slightly out of date. But only 900 notaries in the whole of England and Wales. So it is like a needle in a haystack. And very, very few notaries just focus on corporate clients. And that's all we do at Company Notary. We don't work for individuals. We just do corporate notarial work for corporate clients. So we work with multinationals and companies that have international needs. So there's only 900, and that number's reducing. So but the volume of notary work is going up. So what does a notary do? We administer oaths affirmations, so sworn statements. We take affidavits and statutory declarations. We witness the execution of a variety of documents, like powers of attorney, formations of new companies, tenders, contracts. And we provide exemplifications and notarial copies. An exemplification is basically us confirming a series of statements under our name and seal. Our job is to put the document beyond proof. So we're the trusted individuals by the receiving country. If our seal and stamp's on it, you're good enough for them. That's the logic. Once it's fully notarised and maybe legalised, the document is acceptable to the receiving country. Now, the next few slides are going to give you some tips on how you prepare to see a notary. I've also got some handouts here that you can take away, and those who I managed to email already have this on PDF as well. So lessen your burden of carrying things. So what does a notary do? ICE is what you need to remember. We will check identity of the signatory. We will check capacity of the signatory. Do they understand the document? Sounds obvious. They often they don't. Do they have authority to sign the document? And are they under any duress? Is there any undue influence? Are they being forced or compelled to sign the document? And the third thing we check is that the company that they're signing for actually exists, because quite often they don't, or they've been dissolved, or it's the wrong director for the wrong company. Companies with very large corporate groups can often get, you can get quite tricky sometimes. One of my clients is G4S PLC, and they have 780 subsidiaries, and I see them every week, and they are probably one of the most organised corporates I've ever come across in terms of knowing the directors that go with the subsidiaries. Absolutely fantastic. But it takes a lot of organisation internally. So always bear that in mind, that you're going to need to satisfy the notary on those 3 points. So this is your first piece of checklist information. ID. We will always need to see the photo ID of the director, passport or driving licence. We'll also need to see something that shows their residential address, utility bill, or a bank statement, or a council tax bill. And once we've seen them, and got a copy of them, you only need to see it once. You know, unless they have a personality change completely, we don't need to see anything else from them. If there's a change of name, so this particularly is applicable to female directors, if there's a change of name, then we also need to see the divorce certificate, or the marriage certificate, or the deed poll, because our job is to prove that the person signing is the person signing, and we need to be able to back it up if ever we're asked. And we also need to know the capacity in which they're signing. So if they're a director, the easiest thing for you to do is to send in by email or hard copy the last copy of the annual return that was filed at Companies House, because that shows all of the directors. So it confirms that they're a director of the company. So that's nice and straightforward. So photo ID, utility bills, change of name, and what basis are they signing? Sometimes it might not be a director who's signing, it might be a business development manager, for example, or a commercial manager. They might be signing under a power of attorney or by virtue of some kind of written resolution. If you've got it, let us have it. We can normally get around it if we don't have the copy, but it's useful for us to have it on file. Corporate ID, company number and registered office, the certificate of incorporation or change of name, so we can track to the actual company name that the company now has, the articles and memorandum of association, board resolution authorising a particular transaction, particularly for powers of attorney, and annual return. And we always recommend that you send the notary the email version of the document that needs to be notarised, plus the company number and registered office, plus the name of the signatory. The reason for that is the notary can then produce the certificate ahead of time, and you then minimise the amount of hassle at your end in terms of the meeting time. We try to keep our meeting times with the directors to 5 to 10 minutes. We can achieve that if we've got everything else organised ahead of time. Translations. When I talked about capacity and understanding, it's amazing how many times I've been asked to sign documents as a notary which is in Arabic. And I don't speak Arabic. And I say to the director, do you speak Arabic? He goes, no, I don't speak Arabic. So, okay, so we've got a slight problem here. None of us know what this document is. I can't even work out where to sign, let alone what the document actually says. So always make sure that you get a translation to any foreign language document. 2 reasons for doing it. Number 1, it's just good business conduct. Number 2, more importantly, with my lawyer's hat on, if your director doesn't understand the document that he's signing, he or she is signing, how can they bind or commit the company? So when you have subsidiaries or external lawyers putting pressure on you internationally to sign documents and they haven't produced the foreign version, push back and ask for the foreign translation. And if you ever get any problem, just get them to ring me and I'll tell them why. Because it's very important. And you can feel a bit of pressure sometimes if you've got a time constraint and you're being told that you've got to get it signed. Your job, gatekeepers, your job is to make sure that it's the right document being signed, so it has to have an English translation. So these are the sorts of reasons why I come and see PAs all the time and their directors. Setting up a foreign company or doing activities in relation to a foreign company, taxation, trademarks, patents, whether it's registration or assignment in a different country, contracts, agreements, bids, EU bids, NATO bids, export, certificate of origin, things like that. The whole range of deals and transactions ranging from acquisitions and disposals of companies through to listings on stock exchanges and joint ventures, which are quite common in the context of international business these days. You build relationships with international partners. Court documents, I hope you don't litigate, but if you do, court proceedings, we often get involved in notarising those when the proceedings are held in a different country. Powers of attorney are probably the most common document I deal with as a notary for corporates, because the mothership is authorising somebody in Ghana to be their representative to try to grow the business. Powers of attorney are really important from a legal perspective. They are often too widely drawn in terms of how they're drafted. And what you need as a director in a company is to make sure that the gentleman in Ghana has this remit and that's it. And often the powers of attorney that get drafted by the lawyers overseas are this, how long is a piece of string? So if your boss isn't going to read the power of attorney, maybe you might want to. Certified company or director information, we're often asked to certify memorandum of articles or certificates of incorporation. Work visas, just had an interesting one recently where a lady is going to work in Dubai. She got married in Zambia. And you try getting a certified copy of a marriage certificate out of Zambia. It took us 6 weeks. And we ended up talking to the actual ambassador in the UK, in London. So, and the last thing is insurance and shipping documents. We get to protest damage to ships on a regular basis if we want to. So if a ship gets damaged or cargo falls overseas, oops, in order to make the insurance stick in terms of it being a registrable claim, the captain of the boat comes along, or the master comes along and says to me, I protest, he says, I protest that my ship was damaged. And we go, oh. And then we write a statement telling the insurance companies all about that. We also do bills of exchange and financial documents, but I've only ever done that twice since 1999. So, headache. So you've seen the notary, you think you've got it sorted, and then someone says, yeah, but it's for India, or yeah, it's for Venezuela. And you put your head in your hands because you know now that needs more. That isn't just a notary, it now needs to go to the Foreign Office for an apostille or a certificate, and it then needs to go to the embassy or the consulate. Each country has a different requirement, and we had to learn it off by heart when we qualified. Each state in the States, each state and province in Canada and Australia have different requirements, and we know those off by heart. How sad are we? You don't need to know them off by heart. I'm going to give you a few sort of tips on sort of general rules. I'm also going to let you have details of our own database that we use that will help you. But it's very important to be aware of what you might need. As soon as you know that you've got an international document coming, even if it hasn't arrived in your inbox, as soon as you know, it's best to check what you might need, because then you have to manage expectations. And if you've got somebody overseas saying, I need the document yesterday, and you're saying, yes, we can't have it for 10 days, somebody has to manage those expectations. And it can be a bit frustrating and stressful for the PA and DA, and I think it's a little bit unfair. So we'll try and help you minimise that. So legalisation is the process of authenticating me. I authenticate your bosses, your directors, and the Foreign Office authenticates me. That's legalisation. If ever you have a requirement which you think might need a notary, just go onto our site and you'll be able to find our free wizard. And it has an A to Z checklist. You put your email in or not, it's up to you, and you just put there's a drop down with all the countries, click it, and it will immediately tell you what your document needs and will give you a checklist. So you just use that free of charge for us. I never need to talk to you ever again, but you're more than welcome to use this. And if you need help, you can come and talk to us, of course. But that means that you can start managing expectations within your teams. Okay, so general rules. The EU, 27 member states. If it's EU, you will need to see a notary and the document will need to go for an apostille. But that's it. Doesn't need anything else. And that can take a maximum of 3 days. Sometimes less. BRIC. I imagine a lot of you are looking at India, China, Russia, Brazil. Okay. They're all a little bit more awkward, I'm afraid. So in the case of Russia and India, notary appointment plus the apostille from the FCO. If you are going to deal with Brazil or China, it's those two things plus the embassy or the consulate on top. So again, just double check ahead of time. Middle East, really awkward group of countries in terms of documentation. Notary appointment plus the FCO plus the consulate or the embassy, and for 6 or 7 of them, including Kuwait, Egypt, Jordan, Oman, Yemen, the Arab British Chamber of Commerce. You might want to hand that over to a notary because that's in terms of organising that. Any questions so far? So, that was all about notarial work, and I'm always happy to take questions. I'm here for the next 2 days. I just want to talk a little bit about business culture. Understanding culture internationally isn't just the responsibility of your director, it's also, I think, good for you to understand the business culture that your directors are working in as well, because you are going to be interacting with those countries on a regular basis. So encourage training and personal development. I think it's well worth it. I fought long and hard in my law firm to have my PA have some international cultural training, and it was great because then we were both on the same page. When you do international business, it involves a personal investment, or should involve a personal investment in culture. The more you become attached to a country, the more you like a country, the more the country likes you back. So I've been much more successful in India than I have China. And appreciate the subtleties. It really isn't like doing business here. It's often like doing... It might look on the face of it that it is, but actually cultural hierarchy, family values, regional values, religious values, all of those impact on how business gets done. And if you just try and steamroll through, it doesn't work. I tried that in the early days. Doesn't work at all. Etiquette and approach is really, really important. Handing over business cards, how you write emails. You know, you're very efficient ladies, okay? So you'll be sending emails to your colleagues all the time, where you're saying, send me such and such, thanks. Very short, crisp. You couldn't do that in Japan. You'd have to go, dear Miss Stallwood, I mean, blah, 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 blah. And then you'd have to be very, very formal. You have to be very careful about how you use email in etiquette as well. And you are an extension of your directors on the email, so that's quite important. And approach is good. There's a great story from George Bush where he presented some lovely embroidered cowboy boots with the American flag and the Chinese flag to the Chinese premier, and thought that it was fantastic. And the Chinese premier and this whole delegation were in uproar because in China the feet are considered the lowest part of the body. Oops. So someone got that really, really wrong. Being aware of the risks is the second slide. We've all heard about the Bribery Act, yeah, and facilitation payments and all of that. So I'm sure you've got that awareness as well. What works here doesn't necessarily work there. Thank yous and gifts we've just touched on. and making sure you don't get that wrong. Also in the context of your directors taking people out for dinner. I've got that really wrong before, where I've been in Malaysia and I've booked somewhere that I thought would be appropriate and nice for everybody, and I hadn't even begun to think about some of the cultural issues, and I got that so wrong. Yeah, not my best moment. So I'm sharing my potholes with you. Okay. So the bigger picture, in a lot of the emerging markets, family is everything, community is really important. Doing business within your community is very important. Hierarchy is considered as being very important, as well as gender. And so I've had to grapple with all of that with the international work I've done over the last 6 or 7 years. And it can be very frustrating, but you just have to have a level of acceptance in terms of how business gets done, and to bear in mind that it's very important. This is very important to the certain cultures that I do a lot of work in India, a lot of work in Thailand, and some of these cultural values that aren't as prevalent or obvious here are really, really, really important over there. And it's my job to make sure that I appreciate it properly and take the time. And taking the time is really important. Internationally, everything's long term. It takes time to build relationships. It takes time to get to profit. So when your boss comes back from his trip and he's frustrated because he hasn't been able to progress as quickly as he might, it's okay. You should say to him, you might need 6 more trips. Because in certain markets, that's probably the minimum you might need. But it can be very frustrating if there's pressure being placed on the director in terms of delivery. So international negotiation and deals, we'll touch on. It's not simple. It's not straightforward doing any kind of international activity, as I'm sure you're aware from your day-to-day dealings. There are often restrictions on foreign participation or foreign investment. It might not be as straightforward as I want to go and win that contract to supply aircraft components. You might need to go and get permissions from the government. You might have limitations. You might be forced to have a local partner, which means, do I trust them? There's a whole range of issues. Negotiating with the right person. Having looked at the delegate list, most of you work directly to CEOs and MDs. Yep. You would think, wouldn't you, that in other markets, when you're working with another company, that talking to the CEO and the MD would be the right person for your boss to talk to. It's often not. In a lot of emerging markets, it's actually, you've got to go and talk to the owner. You have to talk to the promoter and the people who own the shares. So it's quite different to here. And I've had situations where I've been with delegations and they come back and they've had great meetings. I've met the director for commercial, I met the director for business development. He's said that we're going to do this business. And I've taken them aside and said, have you met the owner? Oh, I don't need to. Yes, you do. So negotiating with the right person is very, very important. Building in cultural awareness to your approach. And I say your approach because you and your directors are inextricably linked. There's an umbilical cord between the two of you. So you need to be aware of that as much as he or she does. Quiet confidence through preparation, but without arrogance, would be the negotiation style I would recommend. And that also includes when you're dealing PA to PA overseas. Being quietly confident, helpful and supportive, so you're building a relationship that mirrors the relationship your directors are trying to build as well, would really help. And the reason for that is all about FaceSaving. In the UK, you can negotiate, and you can negotiate really hard and in a way that actually might embarrass somebody or might make somebody look bad. You definitely can't do that in a lot of other markets. It is the height of rudeness, and it means a transaction that was on the table is firmly off the table forever. So face is very, very important. Patience, a little progress is okay, and being frustrated with the delay, with the lack of progress, can be absolutely deadly. So do whatever you can to reduce the blood pressure of your directors and also your own blood pressure. Being very clear and consistent is very important, including in emails, making sure that they are very clear in terms of next steps and what needs to happen, because you've got to track it. You've got to make sure that things are moving along, and sometimes you get lots of very flowery emails passing and then nothing happens. I've got some nods in the room. So it's about making sure that you've got at least some kind of follow-up and an execution path. And you are supreme at doing that. You are good at execution. And checking understanding frequently, including checking your boss's understanding, your director's understanding. Are you sure that these people are going to want to do the deal? Because if it's not going to happen, someone needs to help your boss just kill it and just say, right, okay, this one's not going to happen. I'm going to move on to the next thing. So pay attention to what is not said, especially in negotiations, including when you're talking and you're dealing with PAs overseas. What's not said is often what you actually need to be discussing. People don't like saying what they don't know. In other markets, we'll say, sorry, I don't understand. In many other markets, they won't tell you what they don't know. They'll just be quiet. So it's best to work out what the gaps are. Focus and keep everyone focused. That's entirely your job. Contracts, just so you know, the real protection's in the personal relationships. So you can spend lots of time with lawyers in these new markets, but what really matters is the personal relationship your directors have built with their opposite numbers, or with the owners and the people who own the shares. That's what gets you out of trouble. Taking on more responsibility to get things moving, if necessary. So don't leave it for the PAs on the other side of a supply relationship or a client relationship to necessarily get it done. Take a little bit more ownership. It might seem like more work, but in the long run it will be less work because you won't be chasing as much. And don't forget the notary requirements. So here's a roundup. Doing business internationally equals culture, full stop. I'll take the last point next. If there's one takeaway for today, apart from check notaries requirements early on, see if you can get your bosses, your directors to convince the budget holders that you can have some cultural training, because it's worth its weight in gold. If there's one or two countries that you are working with a lot more, then getting that extra understanding is really helpful. And you can get a lot of it online, but there's no substitute for actually having a 2 or 3 hour sit down with someone. Because you can also say, look, I've got a roadblock. This isn't happening. I don't know why it's not happening. I can't move it forward. And the cultural trainer will be able to give you some guidance. And we know a few of them, so we're happy to put you in touch. Notarial requirements. Make sure that you check as soon as you know you've got a sniff of a notary document, and then we can help you manage expectations and reduce your pressure. Keep your board director's ID on file. If one board meeting, get all of your directors to bring in their ID and then put it in a file. So the next time you have a notary requirement, you might have the director, but the director might have forgotten his ID. Doesn't matter, you've got it all on file. That's quite a useful thing to do. Translations, you always need to make sure you have those. Preparing for post-trip activities before the director's left the country. Don't let him leave the country or her leave the country until you've agreed the post-trip follow-up. Finding a Deepak, if you can. Don't steal mine. No, you're all more than welcome to borrow mine anytime. And again, finally, this is all about you this 2 days. Ask your directors to invest in you, because if you're going to be helping them with more international activities, they need to invest in you to help you do that. That's it. Now I need some questions because my throat's nearly gone. That was a bit of a whistle stop, but I hope that was helpful. Any questions, ladies? Yes?
Where did you find your Deepak?
Deepak was the Intercontinental Hotel, and it was purely by accident.
Sorry, would you mind repeating the question, please?
Sure. The question was, where did I find my Deepak? So this is going to end up on a blog, isn't there, somewhere? I can see this now. .com. He was just a regular taxi guy at the Intercontinental, and I've never found anyone like him since. So it was very, very lucky. But I spent a lot of time sitting with him, helping him understand why time's important to me, why the meetings are important, what I'm trying to get out of the meetings, which sectors I'm interested in. So we've built up a strong relationship between the two of us. But I think there's definitely a market for it, because it was Mumbai in the 2 years before. Without him, it was just a nightmare. I fell in every single pothole you could imagine. So, on a serious level, if you do have requirements in Mumbai or Delhi, I can help you I can point you in the right direction just through the other connections that we have, because it is gold dust. Yeah. Any other questions?
Can I ask a question about the translation?
Sure.
Who's the...
Sorry, can I just pick that up on the microphone, please?
Yeah.
Just hold 2 seconds, because I just need to... You dropped my camera once already.
So I was going to ask a question about translation. So I was wondering who the onus is on to obtain the translation, whether it's the company providing the document or you as the recipient, and where you go to find someone who's going to translate it accurately enough
Sure.
for a legal document.
There's, in terms of the responsibility, my view is always, wherever possible, have the country or the company that's producing the document produce a translation. More often than not, they're actually produced by a lawyer. And in terms of UK-based translation agents, there are a multitude of them. Those that are registered with the British Association of Translators are the ones I tend to go for. But 9 times out of 10, you should be able to get it from the recipient country. And it really shouldn't enter your inbox. It shouldn't enter your inbox without it. That's what we say with our clients. Because we go in and we train PAs, we go through a whole map of the countries, and what we say to the PAs that we work with is, you are the gatekeeper. You decide when a document is ready for your boss and your directors, and until it meets your criteria, which is basically our criteria, it doesn't get to them because they haven't got time to waste. So that would be, so I would definitely insist that it's from the receiving country. Thank you for that. Hello.
I'm just going to grab the microphone through just so we can pick up your question.
That should be fine, just there.
Thank you very much.
Why are there so few notaries?
I've no idea. It is quite a boring job. No, I'm joking. It's the oldest branch of the legal profession. It's never advertised in terms of qualifying. I qualified because I was working in house. When I first started my career, I started in an aviation multinational. And we were on a big airfield in the middle of nowhere, and we were doing Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, all sorts of awkward countries, and my directors needed to see a notary all the time, and we couldn't find one, and we couldn't find one to come out to us at all. We had to get our directors to travel 35 to 40 minutes each time to go and see a notary, and I thought that's ridiculous. So I decided to qualify then. So it was my experience essentially as being a PA in a multinational. When I first started my job, I thought this is just such a headache, and that's why I qualified. And it's why I set up Company Notary, because the vast majority of lawyers are lawyers first and notaries second. I don't practice as a lawyer anymore, really. I'm a commercial negotiator and I do international deals, but I work with the notarial hat on for PAs. That's why I set it up, because it's a headache.